The whole point of the slug is to be a URL-safe version of the name. And ideally, this wouldn't be something we need to set manually, or even think about. In a perfect world, we would be able to set the name of a question, save, and something else would automatically calculate a unique slug from the name right before the insert query. We accomplish this in our fixtures, but only there. Let's accomplish this everywhere. To do that, we are going to install another bundle. Google for Stoff Doctrine Extensions bundle and find its GitHub page. And then click over to its documentation, which lives on Symfony.com. This bundle gives you a bunch of superpowers for entities, including one called Sluggable. And actually, the bundle is just a tiny layer around another library called Doctrine Extensions. This is where the majority of the documentation lives. Anyways, let's get the bundle installed. Find your terminal and run composer require stoff/doctrine extensions bundle. You can find this command in the bundle's documentation. And oh, interesting. The install stops and says, the recipe for this package comes from the contrib repository, which is open to community contributions. Review the recipe at this URL. Do you want to execute this recipe? When you install a package, Symfony Flex looks for a recipe for that package, and recipes can live in one of two different repositories. The first is Symfony/recipes, which is the main recipe repository and is closely guarded. It's hard to get recipes accepted here. The other repository is called Symfony/recipes-contrib. This is still guarded for quality, but it's much easier to get recipes accepted here. For that reason, the first time you install a recipe from recipes-contrib, Flex asks you to make sure that you want to do that. So you can say yes, or I'm actually going to say P for yes permanently. I committed my changes before recording, so when this finishes, I'll run git status to see what the recipe did. Okay, it enabled the bundle, of course, and it also created a new config file, stoff-doctrine-extensions.yaml. Let's go check that out. Config packages stoff-doctrine-extensions.yaml. Okay, nothing too interesting yet. As we saw, this bundle comes with a bunch of special features for entities. And each time you want to use a feature, you need to enable it in this config file. The first behavior we want is sluggable. To enable it, add ORM:, because we're using the doctrine ORM, and then default:, because we want to enable this on our default entity manager. That's really not important except in edge cases where you have multiple database connections. Then sluggable true. That's it. Well, sort of. This won't make any real difference in our app yet, but internally, the sluggable feature is now active. Before we start using it, in Question Factory, remove the code that sets the slug. I'll delete this logic, but keep an example function for later. Now, temporarily, if we reload our fixtures with Symfony console doctrine fixtures load, yep, a huge error because slug is not being set. So, how do we tell the doctrine extensions library that we want the slug property to be set automatically? The library works via annotations. In the question entity above the slug property, add @gedmo/slug, making sure to autocomplete this so that PHPStorm adds the use statement for this annotation. The @gedmo/slug annotation has one required option called fields. Set it to name. Done! The slug will now be automatically set right before saving to a URL-safe version of the name property. Back at the terminal, try the fixtures now. No errors. And on the homepage, yes, the slug looks perfect. We now never need to worry about setting the slug manually. Internally, this magic works by leveraging Doctrine's event or hook system. The event system makes it possible to run custom code at almost any point during the life cycle of an entity. Basically, you can run custom code right before or after an entity is inserted or updated, right after an entity is queried for, or other times. You do this by creating an event subscriber or entity listener. We do have an example of an entity listener in our API platform tutorial if you're interested. Next, let's add two more handy fields to our entity, created at and updated at. The trick will be to have something automatically set created at when the entity is first inserted and updated at whenever it's updated. Thanks to Doctrine extensions, you're going to love how easy this is.